Officer Jake Morrison was face down on the asphalt, handcuffs cutting into his wrists as federal agents dragged him across the police station parking lot. Civilians stopped and stared. A decorated 10-year veteran cop was being arrested in broad daylight. But this wasn't just any arrest. Morrison had done the unthinkable. The bodycam footage that was supposed to prove Morrison's innocence. It actually showed him committing an unthinkable crime. The same footage his own department thought they'd deleted forever. Detective Marcus Williams had risked everything to recover that evidence. Death threats. Career suicide. Family in danger. But Williams kept digging because he knew the truth: this wasn't just one bad cop. This was a conspiracy that reached the lieutenant's office. The captain's desk. Maybe even higher. Morrison was screaming that this was all a mistake as they shoved him into the federal vehicle. But the real question wasn't whether Morrison was guilty. The real question was how many more cops were about to fall. Because that recovered footage didn't just show Morrison's crime. It revealed something far more terrifying. A network of corruption so deep, so systematic, that it had been operating for years right under everyone's nose. And Detective Williams? He'd just lit the fuse on a bomb that was about to explode the entire department. What Morrison did to that teenager will shock you. But what his fellow officers did to cover it up. That's what nearly got Williams killed. It started with flashing red and blue lights on a Tuesday night that would change everything. 18-year-old Damon Carter was driving home from track practice when Officer Jake Morrison pulled him over for what seemed like a minor traffic violation. Just another routine stop. Just another night on patrol for Morrison. But there was nothing routine about what happened next. Morrison approached Carter's vehicle with his partner, Officer Lisa Rodriguez. The body cam was rolling, or so everyone thought. Morrison's reputation preceded him everywhere he went. 10 years on the force. Commendations for bravery. Community service awards. The kind of cop that made parents feel safe when their kids walked home at night. The kind of officer that other cops looked up to. Morrison wasn't just respected, he was practically untouchable. License and registration, Morrison said, his voice calm and professional. Carter complied immediately, hands visible, no sudden movements. He'd been taught by his parents how to interact with police. Stay calm. Be respectful. Follow instructions. Everything his family had drilled into him since he was old enough to drive. But something felt wrong from the start. Morrison's questions became more aggressive. More probing. He asked Carter to step out of the vehicle. Then came the search. Morrison claimed he smelled marijuana, a claim that would later prove to be completely fabricated. Carter protested his innocence, but his words fell on deaf ears. That's when Morrison made his discovery. A substantial amount of cocaine, hidden in Carter's vehicle. Enough to suggest intent to distribute. Enough to destroy a young man's life. Morrison held up the evidence bag like he'd just solved the crime of the century. Rodriguez stood by, uncomfortable but silent. The arrest was swift and brutal. Carter was handcuffed, read his rights, and thrown into the back of the patrol car. His protests of innocence were dismissed as typical criminal behavior. His shock seemed genuine, but who would believe him? A young black man from the wrong side of town versus a decorated police officer with an impeccable record? The case seemed open and shut. Morrison's report was thorough, professional, and damning. The evidence was clear. The arrest was by the book. District Attorney's Office was ready to prosecute immediately. This was exactly the kind of drug bust that made careers and cleaned up neighborhoods. But there was one problem with Morrison's perfect arrest. Every single word of it was a lie. The drugs weren't Carter's. The search wasn't legitimate. The evidence wasn't discovered, it was planted. And Morrison? The decorated officer with the sterling reputation? He was about to be exposed as something far more dangerous than any street criminal he'd ever arrested. The bodycam footage that would prove Carter's innocence and Morrison's guilt was supposed to capture everything. But mysteriously, conveniently, it had malfunctioned at the most crucial moment. Or so Morrison thought. Damon Carter wasn't just any teenager. He was 18 years old with the world at his feet and a future brighter than most kids dared to dream. Honor roll student. Team captain of his high school track team. Full-ride scholarship to State University waiting for him after graduation. The kind of success story that made his single mother, Patricia Carter, work double shifts at the hospital just to see her son achieve what she never could. This wasn't some street kid with a criminal record. This wasn't a troubled youth who'd been in and out of the system. Damon Carter had never even received a detention slip, let alone been arrested. His coaches called him a natural leader. His teachers praised his work ethic. His teammates looked up to him. College scouts had been watching him since his sophomore year. The scholarship wasn't just about running fast, it was about escaping poverty. It was about becoming the first person in his family to graduate college. It was about proving that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. Patricia Carter had sacrificed everything to give her son this chance. Extra shifts. Second jobs. Skipped meals so Damon could have proper running shoes and training equipment. Now, in one night, it was all gone. The arrest made local news immediately. Local track star arrested on drug charges. The headlines were brutal and unforgiving. The scholarship was suspended pending investigation. College coaches stopped returning phone calls. Teammates avoided him in the hallways. Teachers looked at him with disappointment and suspicion. Patricia Carter couldn't afford a high-powered attorney. The public defender assigned to Damon's case had 17 other cases that week and barely had time to review the file. The evidence seemed overwhelming. A decorated police officer's word against a teenager's desperate denials. The family was devastated. Patricia Carter aged 10 years in 10 days. She couldn't understand how her son, the boy who'd never even tried alcohol, who spent his free time volunteering at youth programs, could be involved with drugs. But the evidence was right there in black and white. Morrison's report. The drugs found in Damon's car. The arrest photos. Damon's younger sister, Maya, stopped talking to friends at school. The family's reputation in their tight-knit community was destroyed overnight. Neighbors whispered. Church members offered prayers but kept their distance. The Carter family went from being a source of pride in their neighborhood to a cautionary tale about kids going wrong. What would you do if your entire future was destroyed by a lie? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Have you ever seen someone's life completely turned upside down by false accusations? Because what happened to Damon Carter next will make you question everything you think you know about justice. Detective Marcus Williams had seen enough drug arrests to know when something stank. 23 years on the force, 12 as a detective, and he could smell a setup from across the precinct. But this case made his gut twist in ways that kept him awake at night. The assignment came down from Lieutenant Hayes like any other, routine follow-up investigation on Morrison's drug bust. Open and shut case, she said. Kid got caught red-handed, just dot the I's and crossed the T's for the DA. Williams expected to spend maybe 2 hours on paperwork and move on to real crimes. Then he met Damon Carter. Williams had interrogated hundreds of suspects. Drug dealers, gang members, career criminals who could lie through their teeth without blinking. He knew the tells, the nervous fidgeting, the rehearsed stories, the way guilty people's eyes darted around the room looking for escape routes. Carter did none of that. The kid sat across from Williams in the interrogation room, hands folded, looking him straight in the eye. When Williams asked about the drugs, Carter's confusion wasn't performed, it was bone-deep, genuine bewilderment. His voice cracked when he talked about his scholarship. Tears weren't fake when he mentioned disappointing his mother. Detective, I swear on my sister's life, I've never seen those drugs before, Carter said, his voice steady despite the tears. I don't even drink. Ask anyone who knows me. So Williams did. Coach Martinez had known Carter for 4 years. That boy doesn't even take aspirin without asking permission, he told Williams. Drugs? You might as well accuse him of murder. It's that ridiculous. Mrs. Henderson, Carter's AP English teacher, laughed when Williams brought up drug use. Damon Carter? Detective, that young man tutors elementary kids after school. He organizes charity drives. If he's using drugs, then I'm running a meth lab in my classroom. Williams interviewed 12 people who knew Carter personally. Teachers, coaches, teammates, neighbors, church members. The story was always the same: this kid was cleaner than a whistle. No parties. No drinking. No suspicious behavior. No unexplained money or lifestyle changes. But it was Carter's mother who sealed it for Williams. Patricia Carter sat in her living room, surrounded by her son's trophies and academic awards, and broke down completely. Detective, I work 60 hours a week. I know where my son is every minute of every day. Track practice, school, home, church. That's his life. He calls me if he's going to be 5 minutes late. She pulled out Damon's training journal, 4 years of meticulous records. Every workout, every meal, every supplement carefully documented. The kid treated his body like a temple because he knew his scholarship depended on peak performance. He won't even eat fast food during track season, Patricia said through her tears. You think he'd risk everything for drugs? Williams left that house knowing he was looking at an innocent family destroyed by lies. But knowing it and proving it were two different things. The evidence against Carter was solid: drugs in his car, Morrison's testimony, the arrest report. On paper, it was airtight. But Williams had learned to trust his instincts over paperwork. And every instinct he had was screaming that Damon Carter was telling the truth. The question was, if Carter didn't put those drugs in his car, who did? And why? Williams' first move was standard procedure: request all evidence from the arrest. Morrison's report, photographs, witness statements, and most importantly, the bodycam footage that would show exactly what happened during the traffic stop. That's when the red flags started flying. Camera malfunctioned, Sergeant Davis told him, not even looking up from his paperwork. Technical glitch. Happens sometimes. Williams frowned. What about the dashboard cam? Same thing. Both cameras went down right before the search. In 23 years, Williams had never seen both recording systems fail simultaneously. The department's bodycams were military-grade equipment, designed to function in combat zones. The dashboard cameras were independently powered and maintained. For both to malfunction at the exact moment Morrison discovered the drugs? The odds were astronomical. Did IT look at the equipment? Williams asked. Already checked. Hardware failure. Nothing recoverable. Williams requested Morrison's previous arrest reports. Maybe there was a pattern of equipment failures. But Morrison's record was spotless. Every other arrest had perfect video documentation. Crystal clear footage of traffic stops, searches, evidence collection. Morrison was meticulous about following protocol. Except for this one time. When Williams brought his concerns to Lieutenant Hayes, her reaction was immediate and dismissive. Williams, you're overthinking this, Hayes said, barely glancing at his notes. Morrison's been doing this for 10 years. The kid had drugs in his car. End of story. But the camera failures dash. Shit happens, Marcus. Equipment breaks. You want to throw out a solid drug bust because of a technical glitch? Hayes leaned back in her chair, studying Williams with cold eyes. Look, I know you like to be thorough, but sometimes a drug arrest is just a drug arrest. The DA wants this case wrapped up quickly. Don't complicate things. The dismissal felt wrong. Hayes was usually supportive of thorough investigations. She'd always encouraged her detectives to dig deeper, ask harder questions. But now she seemed almost eager to close the case without proper scrutiny. Williams pressed harder. What if we're wrong? What if this kid is innocent? Hayes' expression hardened. Then he should have thought about that before getting caught with cocaine. Drop it, Williams. That's an order. Walking out of Hayes' office, Williams felt the familiar weight of institutional pressure. The unspoken message was clear: don't rock the boat. Don't question a decorated officer's arrest. Don't dig too deep into convenient equipment failures. But Williams had built his career on asking uncomfortable questions. He'd solved cases other detectives had written off as hopeless because he refused to accept easy answers. The Carter case had too many convenient coincidences, too many unanswered questions. And now his own lieutenant was actively discouraging him from finding the truth. That's when Williams realized this case wasn't just about Damon Carter anymore. Something was rotten in his own department, and the smell was coming from the top. Williams sat in his car outside the precinct at 2 a.m., staring at Carter's case file spread across his dashboard. Hayes had made it clear: drop the investigation or face consequences. But every fiber of his being told him an innocent kid was about to have his life destroyed by lies. The smart play was obvious. Follow orders. Close the case. Let the system handle Carter's fate. Williams had a pension to protect, a family to feed, a career to preserve. Rocking the boat over one drug case could end everything he'd worked for. But he kept thinking about Patricia Carter's tears. About Damon's genuine confusion. About a mother working 60-hour weeks to give her son a future that was being stolen by corruption. Williams made his choice. Going rogue meant operating in shadows. No official requests for evidence. No department resources. No backup if things went sideways. He'd have to investigate Morrison and potentially other officers using his own time, his own money, his own contacts. The risks were enormous. If Hayes discovered his unauthorized investigation, Williams could face suspension, demotion, or termination. If Morrison was connected to something bigger, drugs, corruption, organized crime, Williams could be putting his family in danger. His wife Sarah noticed the change immediately. Late nights became later. Phone calls he couldn't explain. Tension that followed him home from work. "Marcus, what's going on?" she asked one morning, watching him gulp coffee and grab files he shouldn't have had at home. "Just a case that's bothering me," he said, kissing her goodbye. "The drug arrest?" "Honey, you've handled hundreds of those." Williams paused at the door. "This one's different." Sarah studied his face, the same expression he'd worn when working the cases that mattered most. The missing child case that kept him up for weeks. The domestic violence investigation that nearly broke his heart. The corruption case that made his career. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Whatever you're chasing, be careful." Williams nodded and walked out, knowing he was about to risk everything for a kid he barely knew. But sometimes doing the right thing meant ignoring the safe thing. Sometimes justice required breaking rules. And sometimes one detective's conscience was all that stood between an innocent person and a lifetime of injustice. The real investigation was about to begin. Williams started where every good investigation begins, with the timeline. Morrison's arrest report claimed the traffic stop happened at 11:47 p.m. on Maple Street. Simple enough. But when Williams pulled Morrison's patrol logs and GPS data, the story got complicated fast. Morrison had clocked in at 6 p.m. for the night shift. His assigned patrol sector was downtown, bars, clubs, the usual Friday night chaos. But according to GPS tracking, Morrison had spent less than 2 hours in his assigned area before going completely off-grid. At 8:23 p.m., Morrison's patrol car pinged a cell tower 15 miles outside his sector. Then nothing. For 3 hours and 24 minutes, Officer Jake Morrison had vanished from the department's tracking system. Williams cross-referenced the GPS data with Morrison's radio communications. Standard protocol required officers to check in every 30 minutes. Morrison had been religious about this throughout his career, until that night. Between 8:30 p.m. and 11:45 p.m., Morrison's radio went completely silent. Equipment malfunction, Morrison had written in his supplemental report. Radio interference in the industrial district. But Williams knew that area. He'd worked patrol there for 5 years. The radio towers had been upgraded 2 years ago specifically to eliminate dead zones. Morrison's explanation was bullshit. Williams drove Morrison's route himself, testing radio communication every few blocks. Crystal clear reception everywhere. No dead zones. No interference. Morrison had deliberately turned off his radio for over 3 hours. The question was why. Williams pulled traffic camera footage from every intersection along Morrison's known route. Most cameras only kept footage for 30 days, but Williams had learned to move fast when chasing leads. The timestamps told a disturbing story. 8:31 p.m., Morrison's patrol car heading south on Industrial Boulevard, away from his assigned sector. 8:45 p.m., same vehicle parked behind Murphy's Auto Parts, engine running, no movement for 18 minutes. 9:03 p.m., Morrison's car leaving Murphy's, heading toward the warehouse district. Then the cameras lost him completely. The warehouse district was a surveillance dead zone, old buildings, abandoned lots, perfect for activities that required privacy. Williams interviewed the night shift workers at Murphy's Auto Parts. Tommy Kowalski, the security guard, remembered seeing the patrol car. "Yeah, cop car was there for maybe 20 minutes, Tommy said, scratching his gray beard. "Thought it was weird. We don't usually get police back there unless there's trouble." "Did you see the officer?" "Nah, windows were tinted. But I saw him talking to someone." Another car pulled up, looked like they were having a meeting. Williams felt his pulse quicken. "What kind of car?" "Black sedan." "Nice one." "BMW, maybe Mercedes." "Definitely not from this neighborhood." Tommy's description matched vehicles associated with Vinny Torino, a mid-level drug dealer who'd been on the department's radar for months. Torino was smart, careful, and had somehow avoided serious charges despite multiple investigations. Williams pulled Torino's surveillance file. The drug dealer operated primarily in the warehouse district, using abandoned buildings for storage and distribution. His organization was sophisticated: lookouts, encrypted communications, multiple safe houses. But Torino had one weakness: he loved expensive cars and wasn't careful about where he parked them. Williams spent the next 2 days canvassing the warehouse district, showing Torino's photo to homeless camps, night shift workers, and anyone else who might have seen something. Most people clammed up at the mention of police business, but Williams had built relationships in this community over the years. Maria Santos, who ran a food truck near the warehouses, finally gave him what he needed. "I seen that guy," she said, pointing at Torino's photo. "He meets with different people back there. Usually late at night. Real secretive like. Ever see him with a police officer?" Maria's eyes widened. "You didn't hear this from me, but yeah. Couple times. Always the same cop car, always the same spot behind the old textile warehouse." Williams felt pieces clicking into place. Morrison wasn't just off his patrol route that night, he was meeting with a known drug dealer in a location perfect for illegal activities. The radio silence wasn't equipment failure, it was deliberate concealment. But Williams needed proof. Witness testimony from a food truck operator wouldn't be enough to challenge a decorated officer's word. He needed hard evidence that Morrison and Torino had been working together. He needed to find that warehouse. The old Hartwell textile warehouse sat like a concrete tomb in the industrial district, surrounded by chain-link fence and decades of rust. Williams had driven past it hundreds of times during his patrol days, never giving it a second thought. Now it might hold the key to exposing the biggest corruption case of his career. Williams approached the building at dawn, when the area was deserted but visibility was good. The main entrance was secured with heavy chains, but Williams noticed fresh tire tracks in the gravel leading around back. Someone had been using this place recently. The rear of the building told a different story. Loading dock doors that should have been sealed were slightly ajar. Fresh oil stains marked regular parking spots. Cigarette butts and energy drink cans suggested recent human activity. This wasn't an abandoned building, it was an active meeting place. Williams needed security footage, but the warehouse itself had no cameras. However, the auto salvage yard across the street had installed a comprehensive surveillance system after a series of break-ins. Williams badged the owner, Frank DeLuca, and explained he was investigating suspicious activity in the area. "You want to see what goes on over there?" Frank laughed bitterly. "I've been calling you guys for months about the traffic. Cars coming and going all hours, meetings in the parking lot. Nobody ever responds to my complaints." Frank led Williams to his security office, a cramped room filled with monitors showing feeds from 12 cameras. "System records everything for 90 days before it overwrites." "What dates you looking for?" Williams gave him the night of Carter's arrest. Frank pulled up the footage and fast-forwarded to 9:15 p.m. The timestamp showed Morrison's patrol car pulling behind the warehouse, followed minutes later by a black BMW sedan. "There's your cop," Frank said, pointing at the screen. "Same car comes here too, 3 times a week. Always meets with that BMW." Williams watched the grainy footage as 2 figures emerged from their vehicles. Even at this distance and resolution, Morrison's uniform was unmistakable. The second figure was shorter, stockier, wearing expensive clothes that caught the security lights. "Can you enhance this?" Williams asked. Frank switched to a different camera angle with better resolution. The enhanced footage clearly showed Morrison shaking hands with Vincent Torino. The meeting lasted exactly 11 minutes. Both men returned to their vehicles, but instead of leaving together, Morrison waited until Torino was gone before departing. "Professional," Williams muttered. "They know how to avoid being seen together." Frank pulled up more dates from the past month. The pattern was consistent. Morrison and Torino met at the warehouse every Tuesday and Friday night, always between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m., always following the same security protocols. But the footage from Carter's arrest night was different. Williams watched as Morrison and Torino met as usual, but this time Torino handed Morrison a small package. Morrison examined it briefly before placing it in his patrol car. The exchange took less than 30 seconds, but it was clearly visible on camera. "Holy shit," Frank whispered. "That cop's dirty." Williams felt his heart pounding. He was watching evidence of a drug transaction between a police officer and a known dealer. The package Torino gave Morrison was the right size and shape to contain the cocaine that would later be discovered in Damon Carter's vehicle. But Williams needed more than surveillance footage from across the street. He needed to prove the connection between this meeting and Carter's arrest. He needed to establish that Morrison had planted evidence. Williams requested the evidence log from Carter's arrest. The cocaine had been logged into evidence at 12:23 a.m., 36 minutes after the arrest. Standard procedure required immediate logging, but Morrison had claimed he needed time to properly document the scene. 36 minutes was exactly how long it would take to drive from the arrest location back to the warehouse district and return to the station. Williams pulled Morrison's GPS data again, this time focusing on the period after Carter's arrest. The patrol car had indeed made an unexplained detour before returning to the station, a detour that took it directly past the Hartwell warehouse. The timeline was damning. Morrison met with Torino at 9:26 p.m. and received a package. At 11:47 p.m., Morrison arrested Carter and discovered drugs in his vehicle. At 12:05 a.m., Morrison's patrol car was tracked near the warehouse district before returning to the station. Williams realized he was looking at a sophisticated evidence-planting operation. Morrison would receive drugs from Torino, plant them on innocent victims, then return any unused product to avoid suspicion. It was systematic, professional, and had probably been going on for months. But this revelation raised even more disturbing questions. How many other innocent people had Morrison framed? How deep did this corruption go? And most importantly, who else in the department knew what Morrison was doing? Williams sat in his car outside the warehouse, staring at the surveillance footage on his laptop screen. The evidence was overwhelming: Morrison taking drugs from Torino, planting them on Carter, then covering his tracks with lies and deleted bodycam footage. An innocent teenager's life had been destroyed to protect a criminal conspiracy. But Williams knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Morrison couldn't be operating alone. Evidence tampering required help from the evidence room. Deleted bodycam footage needed IT assistance. The systematic nature of these meetings suggested ongoing protection from supervisors. This wasn't one bad cop, this was organized corruption. Williams thought about Lieutenant Hayes' immediate dismissal of his concerns. Her eagerness to close the case without investigation. Her unusual pressure to accept Morrison's story without question. Hayes had been Morrison's supervisor for 3 years. She had to know about his pattern of convenient equipment failures and unexplained patrol deviations. The realization hit Williams like a physical blow. Hayes wasn't just dismissing his investigation, she was actively protecting Morrison. The corruption reached into the command structure of his own department. Williams' phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number: "Stop digging or face consequences." His blood ran cold. Someone was watching his investigation. Someone knew he'd found the warehouse footage. Someone was threatening him to back off. Williams looked around the empty industrial district, suddenly aware of how isolated he was. If Morrison was willing to frame innocent teenagers, what would he do to a detective who threatened to expose him? If Hayes was protecting the operation, who could Williams trust in his own department? The smart move was obvious: take the evidence to the FBI, let federal agents handle the corruption case, protect himself and his family from retaliation. But federal investigations took months, maybe years. Damon Carter was facing trial in 6 weeks. His scholarship was already gone. His future was being destroyed while bureaucrats shuffled paperwork. Williams thought about Patricia Carter's tears. About Damon's genuine confusion in the interrogation room. About a mother working 60-hour weeks to give her son opportunities that were being stolen by corrupt cops. He thought about his own oath as a police officer: to protect and serve, to uphold justice, to stand between innocent people and those who would harm them. Even when those criminals wore badges. Williams made his decision. He would continue investigating, despite the threats. He would gather enough evidence to expose the entire network. He would save Damon Carter's future, no matter the personal cost. But first, he needed to find out how deep this corruption really went. At this point, what do you think Detective Williams should do? Would you risk your career for a stranger? Would you put your family in danger to save someone you barely know? Drop your thoughts below, because what Williams discovers next will test every principle he's ever believed in. And the people trying to stop him? They're closer than he thinks. Sarah Chen had been losing sleep for 3 weeks. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lieutenant Hayes standing over her desk, watching as she deleted the bodycam footage from Morrison's arrest. Hayes had called it a routine data cleanup, corrupted files that needed to be purged from the system. But Sarah knew corrupted files when she saw them. These weren't corrupted. They were crystal clear, high-definition recordings that someone desperately wanted to disappear. Sarah had worked IT for the police department for 7 years. She'd seen her share of questionable deletion requests, usually involving officers who'd said something inappropriate on camera or violated minor protocols. But this felt different. Hayes had been unusually insistent, standing over Sarah's shoulder as she worked, making sure every trace of the footage was eliminated. "Make sure it's completely unrecoverable," Hayes had said. "We can't have corrupted data contaminating other files." Sarah had nodded and followed orders. But her finger had hesitated over the final delete command. Something about Hayes' nervous energy, the way she kept checking her watch, the unusual urgency for what should have been routine maintenance, it all felt wrong. So Sarah had made a choice that could end her career. Before executing the deletion, she'd copied the files to a secure external drive hidden in her desk drawer. If the footage was truly corrupted, no harm done. If someone was trying to destroy evidence, she'd preserved it. Either way, she could sleep at night knowing she'd done the right thing. But sleep hadn't come easily. Sarah kept thinking about the young man in the footage, barely older than her own nephew, confused and scared as he was arrested for drug possession. She'd watched enough Bodycam footage to recognize genuine shock versus performed innocence. This kid wasn't acting. When Detective Williams approached her privately in the parking garage, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. She'd been expecting this conversation for weeks, dreading it and hoping for it in equal measure. "Sarah, I need to ask you about some deleted footage," Williams said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Sarah's hands trembled as she unlocked her car. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Morrison's body cam from the Carter arrest. Hayes told me it was corrupted, but I think we both know that's not true." Sarah looked into Williams' eyes and saw something she recognized, the same moral conflict that had been eating at her for weeks. The same choice between following orders and doing what's right. If hypothetically someone had preserved that footage, Sarah said carefully, what would happen to them? Williams understood immediately. Hypothetically, that person would be a hero. And I'd make sure they were protected. Sarah made her second career-defining decision in 3 weeks. "Meet me tomorrow at lunch. Bring a secure drive." Williams' hands shook as he inserted Sarah's drive into his laptop. He was sitting in his car in an empty parking lot, about to watch footage that could destroy careers and save an innocent kid's life. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., the exact moment Morrison claimed to have discovered drugs in Carter's vehicle. The bodycam footage began with Morrison approaching Carter's car. Everything seemed routine at first, professional demeanor, standard traffic stop procedures. Carter was polite, cooperative, hands visible at all times. No suspicious behavior, no signs of impairment or nervousness beyond what anyone would feel during a police encounter. "License and registration," Morrison said, his voice calm and authoritative. Carter complied immediately, reaching slowly for his wallet. "Officer, can I ask why you pulled me over?" "Broken taillight," Morrison replied, though Williams could see from the footage that both taillights were functioning perfectly. The conversation continued normally for several minutes. Morrison asked standard questions about Carter's destination, whether he'd been drinking, if there were any weapons in the vehicle. Carter answered honestly, respectfully, exactly as his parents had taught him. Then Morrison asked Carter to step out of the car. "I'm going to conduct a quick search of your vehicle," Morrison announced. Standard procedure. This was where the footage became devastating. Williams watched in horror as Morrison approached the driver's side of Carter's car, glancing around to ensure his partner Rodriguez was positioned to block the view from the street. Morrison opened the door and leaned inside, his body language casual, routine. But Williams could see what Morrison thought no one would ever witness. Morrison's right hand reached into his duty belt, not for handcuffs or his radio, but for a small plastic bag he'd concealed there. The bag contained white powder, the same cocaine that would moments later be discovered during the search. Morrison planted the drugs under the driver's seat with practiced efficiency, his movements quick and confident. This wasn't his first time. The entire process took less than 15 seconds, hidden from Carter's view by the car door and Morrison's body position. Then Morrison straightened up, closed the door, and walked around to the passenger side where he began his official search. Well, what do we have here?" Morrison said loudly, his voice carrying the perfect tone of surprised discovery as he reached under the seat and retrieved the bag he'd planted moments earlier. Carter's reaction was genuine shock. "What is that?" "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." "Sure it's not," Morrison replied with practiced skepticism. Turn around, hands behind your back. Williams paused the footage, his stomach churning. He was watching an innocent teenager's life being destroyed by a corrupt cop who turned evidence planting into an art form. The casual efficiency of Morrison's actions suggested this was routine, systematic, probably happening to other victims across the city. But the footage revealed something even more disturbing. Rodriguez hadn't just been an unwilling witness, she'd been positioned as a lookout, deliberately blocking sight lines to give Morrison cover for planting evidence. This wasn't one bad cop making a terrible decision. This was a coordinated criminal conspiracy. Williams rewound the footage and watched Rodriguez's behavior more carefully. Her positioning wasn't accidental, she'd moved deliberately to block the view from the street while Morrison planted the drugs. When Morrison discovered the cocaine, Rodriguez showed no surprise, no shock at finding drugs during what should have been a routine traffic stop. Rodriguez had known exactly what was going to happen. Williams pulled Rodriguez's arrest records for the past 6 months. The pattern was disturbing. Rodriguez had been present for 7 drug arrests where bodycam footage was either missing or corrupted. In each case, the suspects were young, minority, with no prior drug convictions. All had maintained their innocence. All had been convicted based primarily on officer testimony. 7 innocent lives destroyed. 7 families torn apart. 7 futures stolen to protect a criminal operation. But Rodriguez was just a patrol officer. She couldn't delete evidence or reassign cases. Someone higher up the chain was orchestrating this systematic corruption. Williams thought about Lieutenant Hayes' immediate dismissal of his concerns, her unusual pressure to close the Carter case quickly. Williams accessed Hayes' personnel file and found connections that made his blood run cold. Hayes had been Morrison's training officer when he first joined the department. She'd recommended him for commendations, promotions, special assignments. Their relationship went back 10 years, plenty of time to develop a criminal partnership. Williams cross-referenced Hayes' duty schedules with Morrison's suspicious arrests. Hayes had been the supervising lieutenant for every single case where evidence went missing or equipment mysteriously malfunctioned. She'd signed off on every deletion request, every evidence transfer, every report that covered Morrison's tracks. The corruption network was becoming clear. Morrison planted evidence and made arrests. Rodriguez provided cover and corroborating testimony. Hayes used her supervisory authority to delete incriminating footage and suppress investigations. Together, they'd created a system that could frame innocent people with near-perfect efficiency. But Williams realized the network might be even larger. Evidence tampering required cooperation from the evidence room. Systematic deletion of bodycam footage needed IT assistance beyond what Hayes could order alone. The smooth operation of this conspiracy suggested involvement from multiple departments within the police force. Williams thought about his threatening text message. Someone had been watching his investigation, tracking his movements, monitoring his activities. That level of surveillance required resources and access that went beyond a few corrupt patrol officers. How many people in his own department were involved? How many innocent victims had been framed? How long had this been going on? Williams realized he wasn't just investigating a single corrupt arrest, he was uncovering a criminal enterprise that had infected his entire police department. The people he'd worked alongside for years, the colleagues he'd trusted with his life, the supervisors he'd respected, some of them were criminals who'd been systematically destroying innocent lives for profit. The scope of the corruption was staggering. And Williams was now the only person who knew the truth. The only person who could stop them. The only person standing between more innocent victims and a network of criminals with badges. Williams spent the next 48 hours digging into Lieutenant Patricia Hayes' background, and what he found made him question everything he thought he knew about his own department. Hayes wasn't just protecting Morrison, she was running the entire operation. The financial records told the first part of the story. Hayes had purchased a $180,000 boat 6 months ago, paying cash. Her salary as a lieutenant was $78,000 annually. She'd also bought a vacation home in Florida and enrolled her daughter in an expensive private college, all on a public servant's income that should have left her struggling to make ends meet. But Hayes had been careful. The purchases were spread across different banks, different time periods, different financial instruments designed to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. Someone had taught her how to launder money professionally. Williams accessed Hayes' case assignment records and discovered the true scope of her involvement. Over the past 18 months, Hayes had personally reassigned 43 drug cases away from experienced detectives to junior officers who wouldn't ask hard questions. She'd expedited evidence processing for Morrison's arrests while delaying investigations that might expose the pattern. She'd systematically placed herself in control of every aspect of Morrison's criminal operation. The evidence deletion requests painted an even darker picture. Hayes had ordered the destruction of bodycam footage from 17 different arrests, always citing technical malfunctions or corrupted data. She'd pressured IT staff to purge backup files and override standard retention protocols. Sarah Chen wasn't the first technician Hayes had intimidated, she was just the first brave enough to preserve evidence. Williams found Hayes' personal phone records through a contact in the DA's office. The call logs revealed regular communication with Vincent Torino, the drug dealer Morrison had been meeting at the warehouse. Hayes and Torino spoke every Tuesday and Friday, the same days Morrison collected drugs for planting on innocent victims. But the most damning evidence came from Hayes' own computer. Williams used his detective access to review her email history and found encrypted communications with someone identified only as the broker. The messages were coded, but the pattern was clear. Hayes was reporting arrest quotas, discussing target selection, and coordinating payment schedules. Package delivered successfully, read one message from Hayes to the broker. Client satisfied with product placement. Ready for next assignment. The reply came within hours, excellent work. New target identified. Higher value this time. Bonus payment authorized. Williams realized he was looking at evidence of a criminal enterprise that went far beyond his police department. Hayes wasn't just a corrupt cop, she was a middle manager in an organization that specialized in destroying innocent lives for profit. The clients mentioned in the email suggested someone was paying to have specific people framed. This wasn't random corruption or opportunistic evidence planting. This was targeted character assassination, systematic destruction of individuals who posed threats to powerful interests. Williams cross-referenced the dates of Hayes' encrypted messages with Morrison's arrest records. Every package delivery corresponded to an innocent person being framed for drug possession. Every client satisfaction report meant another family destroyed, another future stolen, another life ruined by lies. The scope was staggering. Hayes had been running this operation for at least 2 years, possibly longer. Dozens of innocent people had been convicted based on planted evidence. Families had been torn apart. Young people had lost scholarships, jobs, opportunities, all to serve the interests of Hayes' mysterious clients. But Hayes had made one crucial mistake. She'd kept records of everything, probably as insurance against her criminal partners. Her computer contained a complete archive of the conspiracy, names, dates, payments, target lists, communication logs. Williams now had evidence that could bring down the entire network. But he also realized the true danger he was facing. If Hayes was just a middle manager, who was giving the orders? How powerful were the people behind this conspiracy? And what would they do to protect their operation? Williams thought he understood corruption, cops taking bribes, skimming drug money, looking the other way for the right price. But what he discovered about Damon Carter's targeting revealed something far more sinister than simple greed. The answer came from Hayes' encrypted files, buried in a folder labeled Priority Targets. Carter's name appeared on a list of 12 individuals marked for immediate action. Next to each name was a detailed profile, family background, vulnerabilities, potential impact of arrest. Carter's profile was particularly thorough. High-value target, it read. Full scholarship athlete, community role model, strong family support. Maximum social impact. Client priority, eliminate before testimony. Williams stared at the screen, trying to understand what testimony could possibly involve an 18-year-old track star. Then he found the connection that made his blood run cold. Marcus Carter, Damon's older brother. Marcus had been arrested 3 months earlier on drug charges, but unlike his brother, Marcus was actually guilty. He'd been caught dealing cocaine near the university campus and was facing serious prison time. But Marcus had something valuable to trade, information about a drug distribution network that reached into the highest levels of the city's power structure. Marcus had agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony could expose politicians, business leaders, and law enforcement officials who'd been protecting the drug trade for years. The federal case was scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. But Marcus had one weakness that made him vulnerable to pressure: his family. Specifically, his younger brother Damon, the golden child who represented everything Marcus had failed to become. The conspiracy was diabolically simple. Frame Damon for drug possession, destroy his future, and use his prosecution as leverage against Marcus. If Marcus testified against the drug network, his brother would face maximum penalties. If Marcus stayed silent, charges against Damon might be reduced or dismissed. Williams found email exchanges between Hayes and the broker discussing the psychological pressure campaign. Target's brother showing signs of wavering, Hayes had written. Recommend increasing pressure on family unit. Suggest media coverage of younger brother's arrest. The reply was coldly calculating: approved. Ensure maximum publicity. Family destruction more effective than direct threats. Brother will choose family over justice. Williams realized he was looking at something beyond corruption. This was psychological warfare designed to obstruct federal investigations. Innocent people weren't just being framed for profit, they were being used as weapons against their own family members. The cruelty was breathtaking. Damon Carter had been targeted not because of anything he'd done, but because his love for his brother made him a perfect victim. His innocence, his achievements, his bright future, all of it made him more valuable as a tool for manipulating Marcus. Williams checked the federal case files. Marcus Carter had indeed withdrawn his cooperation agreement 2 weeks after Damon's arrest. The federal investigation had stalled without his testimony. Key figures in the drug network had escaped prosecution. The conspiracy had worked perfectly. An innocent teenager's life had been destroyed to protect criminals, and the system had been powerless to stop it. Until now. Williams' investigation had made him a target. The threatening text message was just the beginning. It started with small things. His patrol car's tires were slashed in the department parking lot. His locker was broken into, personal items scattered and damaged. Anonymous complaints were filed against him, alleging excessive force and misconduct during arrests that had happened years earlier. Then the harassment escalated. Williams' home address was posted on criminal forums with false claims that he was a corrupt cop who'd stolen drug money. His wife Sarah received threatening phone calls at work. Their teenage daughter Emma was followed home from school by unmarked cars. "Marcus, what's happening?" Sarah asked one night, finding him checking door locks for the 3rd time. "Emma's scared to leave the house." "I'm scared to go to work." "What kind of case are you working on?" Williams couldn't tell her the truth, that he was investigating his own department, that his colleagues were criminals, that his family was in danger because he'd chosen justice over self-preservation. The knowledge would only put them at greater risk. "Just some bad people who don't want to be caught," he said, pulling her close. "It'll be over soon." But Williams wasn't sure that was true. The pressure was coming from multiple directions now. Captain Morrison, no relation to the corrupt officer, called Williams into his office with disturbing news. "Marcus, I'm getting complaints about your conduct," Captain Morrison said, sliding a thick file across his desk. "Unauthorized investigations, harassment of fellow officers, misuse of department resources." "What's going on?" Williams realized Hayes had been building a case against him, documenting every move he'd made in his investigation. She was preparing to destroy his career before he could expose her crimes. "Sir, I'm investigating serious corruption without authorization. Without oversight. Without following proper channels." Captain Morrison's expression was stern but not unsympathetic. "Marcus, you're a good detective, but you're going about this all wrong. If you have concerns about officer conduct, there are procedures." Williams wanted to explain that the procedures were compromised, that Hayes controlled the oversight mechanisms, that following proper channels would only alert the criminals. But he had no proof the captain would believe, no evidence he could share without revealing his unauthorized investigation. "Take a week off," Captain Morrison ordered. "Get your head straight. When you come back, we'll discuss your future with this department." Williams walked out knowing his time was running out. Hayes was closing in, his family was in danger, and his career was hanging by a thread. But he was closer than ever to exposing the truth. Williams knew he couldn't fight this battle alone. The corruption reached too deep into his own department, the threats against his family were escalating, and Hayes was systematically destroying his career to silence him. He needed federal help, and he needed it fast. Special Agent Rebecca Torres had been investigating drug-related corruption in the city for 8 months. When Williams reached out through a mutual contact in the DA's office, Torres was immediately interested in what he had to offer. "Detective Williams, what you're describing sounds like a RICO case," Torres said during their clandestine meeting at a coffee shop 30 miles outside the city. "Organized criminal enterprise, systematic evidence tampering, obstruction of federal investigations. This is exactly what we've been looking for." Williams handed over copies of everything: the warehouse surveillance footage, Hayes' encrypted communications, the financial records showing unexplained wealth, the pattern of evidence deletion, and most importantly, the bodycam footage showing Morrison planting drugs on Damon Carter. Torres reviewed the evidence with the focused intensity of a federal prosecutor. "This is solid, detective. Really solid. But we need to move fast. If Hayes suspects you're working with us, she'll destroy everything and disappear." The FBI had been building their own case against the drug network that Marcus Carter was supposed to testify against. Williams' evidence provided the missing piece, proof that law enforcement officials were actively protecting the criminal organization by framing potential witnesses and their families. "We can offer your family protection," Torres said. "Witness security, relocation if necessary. But we need your continued cooperation to make this work." Williams thought about Sarah and Emma, about the fear in their eyes, about the choice between his family's safety and an innocent teenager's future. "What do you need from me?" Torres outlined the plan. Williams would continue his normal duties while wearing a wire to record conversations with Hayes and other conspirators. The FBI would coordinate simultaneous arrests to prevent evidence destruction. Federal prosecutors would take over the Carter case and all related prosecutions. "We're talking about a major corruption takedown," Torres explained. "Multiple arrests, federal charges, complete exposure of the network. But it has to be coordinated perfectly. One mistake and they'll scatter like roaches." Williams agreed to the partnership, knowing he was crossing a line that would forever change his relationship with his own department. But as he thought about Damon Carter sitting in jail, about Marcus Carter's silenced testimony, about all the other innocent victims who'd been destroyed by this conspiracy, the choice was clear. Justice required courage. And sometimes courage meant betraying the badge to honor the oath. The federal investigation was about to begin. The takedown happened at dawn on a Tuesday morning, coordinated across 12 locations simultaneously to prevent any conspirators from warning others or destroying evidence. Officer Jake Morrison was the first to fall. FBI agents and internal affairs investigators surrounded him during what he thought was a routine traffic stop on Highway 9. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, Morrison being arrested during the same type of encounter he'd used to frame innocent victims. "Jake Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and violation of civil rights under color of law," Agent Torres announced as Morrison was handcuffed in full view of morning commuters. Morrison's face went white as he realized his criminal career was over. "I want a lawyer," he said, the same words he'd heard from dozens of innocent people he'd framed. Lieutenant Hayes was arrested at her home 20 minutes later. FBI agents had been watching her house since 4 a.m., ensuring she couldn't destroy evidence or flee. They found her in her kitchen, frantically trying to delete files from her personal laptop. "Patricia Hayes, FBI. You're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." Hayes tried to maintain her composure, but Williams could see the panic in her eyes through the surveillance footage the FBI shared with him later. The woman who'd built a criminal empire was reduced to a common criminal in handcuffs. Officer Rodriguez was taken into custody at the precinct, along with 3 evidence room technicians who'd been helping to tamper with drug samples. The arrest sent shockwaves through the department as officers realized the scope of the corruption that had been operating under their noses. Vincent Torino was arrested at his warehouse headquarters, along with 6 members of his drug distribution network. The FBI had been building cases against all of them, waiting for the right moment to strike. By 8 a.m., the entire conspiracy had been dismantled. 14 arrests, millions of dollars in seized assets, and a criminal network that had operated for years was finally brought to justice. The domino effect had begun. Third CTA and justice served, 300 words. The aftermath moved swiftly. Federal prosecutors dismissed all charges against Damon Carter within 48 hours, citing prosecutorial misconduct and planted evidence. His record was expunged, his scholarship was reinstated, and the university welcomed him back with a formal apology. Marcus Carter, no longer under threat of his brother being used as leverage, resumed his cooperation with federal investigators. His testimony led to additional arrests of politicians and business leaders who'd been protecting the drug network. Detective Williams was cleared of all internal complaints and received a commendation for his role in exposing the corruption. But the victory came with a cost. His relationship with many colleagues was forever changed. Some viewed him as a hero who'd saved innocent lives. Others saw him as a traitor who'd betrayed fellow officers. "I'd do it again," Williams told Agent Torres during the final debriefing. "Every single time. That's what the badge is supposed to mean." The federal trials resulted in significant prison sentences. Morrison received 15 years for conspiracy and civil rights violations. Hayes got 22 years for racketeering and leading a criminal enterprise. Rodriguez and the evidence room technicians received shorter sentences in exchange for their cooperation. Most importantly, a review of all cases involving the conspirators led to the exoneration of 37 innocent people who'd been framed over the past 3 years. 37 families reunited. 37 futures restored. 37 lives saved by one detective's refusal to look the other way. Damon Carter graduated summa cum laude and went on to compete in the Olympics. He never forgot the detective who risked everything to save his future. Have you ever witnessed corruption in your community? What's the most shocking case of police misconduct you've heard about? The fight for justice doesn't end with one case, it requires constant vigilance from all of us. Share your stories below, because sunlight remains the best disinfectant for corruption.